that
I'm not reached out to ORJ specifically, but we'll be happy to reach out to her to connect on that.
Yeah. I haven't heard from her specifically either. So. I think it's a pleasant change that ORJ has so many people, because I remember the time when Denise was the only employee for a while. So it's nice to see so many of you guys here. Okay, any other introductions or announcements? Okay, seeing none. Any public comment for any item under the jurisdiction of the RJOB Data Subcommittee? Anybody have any public comment? Okay, we can move to number 3 then, approving the record of action from our last meeting. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a
I move
motion,
approval.
or I can second Bill, either way.
Nicole, you want to take a roll call vote?
Want to open it up for public comment?
Oh, sure. Any public comment about the record of action before we vote to approve? Okay.
Hey, Becky,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes.
Dr. Walker.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can move to item 4, discuss the work plan progress and priorities for 2022. So the work plan is in the packet. And Chris, did you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I can do that. For context, just in case anyone missed the quarterly meeting, we decided at the quarterly meeting that we wanted to take a look at all of these work plans to discuss the progress that we've made up to this point, if there's any need to make shifts or pivots or to in any way tweak or alter the work plan itself, and if not, at least to prioritize specific objectives that we feel like we can complete this year, or make a reasonable headway on, to make sure that the group continues to progress, that there's forward momentum and action on these really significant recommendations that we have, that are all written for the end of achieving racial equity within local criminal legal systems. So basically how this has looked in other subcommittees, I mean, there's only been one that I've been able to do it in up to this point, and that was Diversion, as we sort of walk through, what these objectives are, which all the objectives just come directly from the recommendations. Most of the time it was for me in making these, or at least in making the original drafts that we responded to, it was a copy and paste of language from the recommendation into a grid, and some thought about what we might need to do in order to, make some progress toward these goals, and then sending that to you guys to see what you thought. And so just sort of walking through each aspect of the work plan to see if what the progress has been, if something should be prioritized or deprioritized in terms of our ability to potentially accomplish it this year, and wanting to make sure that this is always sort of what's guiding the work, so that, say, at the end of this year, we can look back and say, objective 1, potentially, or objective 3 or 5 or whatever, like we've either completed that, or we've, made sufficient progress on it. And while it may be something we need to continue to monitor, we can move on to something else. So with that, I have some ideas that I will hold because I want to hear from you guys, but I'll just walk through sort of what each objective is, maybe touch on a couple of the activities and whatnot as we sort of talk about what the progress has been. And this is meant to be a discussion. So I would love to hear from you guys about what has been done or how you feel progress has been made up to this point, where you might want to focus your attention and energy moving forward, and so on and so forth. So that being said, please feel free to unmute and jump in, members, and obviously we'll also open the floor for public comment at the appropriate time. That being said, objective 1 is supporting the collection, reporting of accurate data in all justice and law enforcement agencies countywide, which includes a number of activities, such as links to publicly available data at the national, state, and local level as available. And I think it's worth pointing out here that I think ORJ has gone above and beyond just providing a link to that, right? Actually taking that information and sharing it, and rather than simply providing a link, actually analyzing that data and providing some, I think, pretty easy to read charts and graphs for what that data shows, especially based on, and I'm sure we'll touch on this later, the recent community forum that we had. We were specifically asking if folks had any, trouble reading any of this, or if, we should do something differently. And folks seemed to appreciate the information that was being presented and the way that it was presented, and to be able to read it. So little above and beyond, pats on the back and hand claps to one Denise Zebkevich in particular, I'm sure are in order for that, among various others that maybe I haven't met. But also, you see the second activity there is a prioritized list of countywide or agency data that will support meeting the objectives of the RJOB. And so this is, I don't know that we've developed a list specifically, but what we have been doing, or what you all have been doing, is making requests directly to agencies that we know that we need information from. And I think this is a good enough point for me to mention that there's been some talk in Diversion about looking to extend some requests to various diversion programs to see that to see if we can get race and ethnicity data about diversion utilization as well. So I think that could be a pretty, if we feel like a list is still necessary, a list of agencies, or a list of data needs that we have outside of the request that we made, I think that's something that could be easily done. But certainly the requests have been going out in force from this group for quite some time now. I think that the next activities were about, I think particularly activity 3 on this objective is about how to publicize that the information is there and is available. There are a number of ways, to potentially do that in terms of social media and so on and so forth. And, just wanting to create a plan around how to execute to make sure that folks are aware that there's information available, where they can go to find it, how it might be used, so on and so forth. You'll notice that that's with a caveat that it's an activity for when additional resources become available, to kind of help with doing some of this. So I don't think that additional resources have become available in a way that would make a huge impact. But, this could be an activity that, without, say, an influx of funds, right, there could still be some processing or some ideas about how to be creative in getting the word out to the right folks, that data is available. And the last activity, well, probably not the last, but definitely the next one, is supporting the development of data capacity and practice changes to ensure that data is accurately recorded and reported. This kind of goes to something that we've been talking about, which is that accurate data collection presentation, something that we have tentatively scheduled for May for this group, but may need to think about probably after that presentation, how to involve agencies and folks who would actually be dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, or have some control over what those office policies are within their agency, having them be exposed to that information to hopefully impact what some of those practices are and try to get to some level of uniformity. And I could go through all of these ad nauseum. I am not going to read every one of these. I know that you guys read well. Just any discussion or questions on objective one, which covers a whole lot of different activities in terms of making sure that that we're supporting agencies, and also I think trying to hold agencies accountable for making data available within the county.
I wonder, is there any, I'm just wondering, like normally in education, when we make a plan like this, then we would make like another column that would, where we would add our accomplishments. I know you did that in a different format at the last time we met, Chris, and I wonder if that would be like overkill to do something like that here, or whether maybe it's just, maybe it's just done the other way. But I'm just thinking that like, we have done quite a few things, and it would be great to kind of connect those accomplishments with the work that we were assigned, if that makes sense. So I'm agnostic about the way in which we do that, but I'm just wondering if there's kind of like a standardized way that it's done in your guys' world, because this is not my main world.
I see Denise's hand, and I will just say quickly, I don't think it would be overkill or beyond the pale to do something like that. I think that the work plans primarily, I mean, as far as I know, they primarily seem to exist in PDF form right now. But so, you know, things may need to be copied and pasted into a live document where we could add something like that. But I think that would be a good idea just to keep track and make it a lot easier to, you know, at the end of the year, revisit these and have folks, you know, sort of know without sort of asking, I think in a way that communicates some frustration, like what have we done actually, like what have we actually accomplished. They can actually see it. So I think that's a great idea. Just, you know, logistically need to get it into a format where we can manipulate it again.
We have the live doc, the Word doc on this end.
Beautiful.
Chris, yeah. ORJ does.
Great.
I can
Denise,
review that to you or Becky. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, do you want to work on that, or would you like me to? How do you want to go about doing that?
that is a good question. Why not make it a collaborative process and then bring it back?
Okay.
So if you want to take a first shot at it, and then, you know, we
Sure.
can talk about it from there.
Can you send me a Word version of what you presented at the last meeting? Or a editable version, if you know what I mean? So I could pull out of what you presented?
The slides, yeah. Sure. And again, Denise's hand has been up the whole time, patiently waiting.
No worries. I wanted you to finish your conversation. You know, just with the breadth and the magnitude of the ask in getting all of our law enforcement and criminal justice colleagues on board to share their data, that is a big ask. We've had a couple of asks out there, and in the spirit of keeping the work moving, I would suggest that we also consider adding, you know, like RIPA data to this, to not just the DOJ data that ORJ has put out, but RIPA data will be available, again, not for all law enforcement agencies come January, but it will be for some of our bigger agencies. And that will be a really important source of analyses as we continue to work with our colleagues in getting their data and cleaning it and assessing it, that we can also simultaneously, draw on the annual data that comes out of DOJ. And I would encourage us not to lose sight of that, because I do think it is an important data set, and it will be analyzed once it's released by a broad number of different agencies. And it would be good if, our units were on top of it as well. So I guess that would be a sub-activity under activity. Yeah, I don't know, number 2 maybe.
And I would add also, I think since the last time that I checked, the data that's on the website is that DOJ data so far, and certainly for the if we're looking to have a series of the forums, then we'd like for the next forum to have sort of the updated information that we get on a quarterly basis, hopefully going back to when we started that process, made available or something along that line. I don't know exactly what that would take or how long that would take, but seems like something to lift here, just in terms of making sure that the website is up to date with that sort of information, so that when we're sharing, I mean, that's one of the ways. Definitely part of the objective with the forum was to share that the website is there. And while I don't know that we spent a lot of time on that slide, for everyone who looked at the agenda, there was a link there in the agenda for folks for how to get there. Wanting to make sure that for the next forum, when people click that this sort of information, particularly I think the probation information, which is just so well presented, and could easily lend itself to the types of conversations I think folks are wanting to have, that it's there for them. And it's not like a bait and switch, like, hey, go to the website, but the stuff that we're going to talk about right now is like not there. So just bringing that to folks' attention is something that seems like it might be able to happen with relative pace, as just something to remember to implement.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. We definitely want to have a staged approach to presenting some of this work. I had actually a little trouble in previous conversations in this body getting a sense of what that might look like. And Patrice found the Alameda PD's data research site, and it looks not unlike what I was thinking that we were looking for here. And so moving forward to see if we have, really the question is who's got the capacity to set that up. Our office is not trained at this point in Power BI or any of those other kind of tools that are for, active live display. We're right now, certainly with the work on our plate, better with just preparing the slides that we did before and posting those with the notion that we want to move towards this other quarterly live presentation or live dashboard presentation. Yeah, sure. Come on in.
I think, I appreciate that. I think right now, I think it's, it certainly makes sense to me, right, that we're now ready to move forward with a live sort of manipulable dashboard. And I think sharing just the sort of static information the way we have been doing is perfectly fine. In fact, that's what I'm referring to. So I just mean the
Great,
probation
okay.
data that we have, just that's why I say I think it's something that could happen with relative pace, because I don't mean something we manipulate. I mean just literally taking sort of that data that shows up in our agendas every quarter and making sure that it's updated on the website so that people can just look at it and see it, knowing that at some point in the future, when there's the capacity to do so, there will be a beautiful dashboard, but those things take a lot of time and effort.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks, Chris.
Do we want to keep going through the work plan?
Yes. So many activities on objective one. So that's good enough. Yeah, it won't. Yeah. Objective 2 is very related to what we were just talking about, right? So publishing data related to demographic, justice, law enforcement, and education patterns present within the county by race and ethnicity. So this is something that we literally just discussed, that is already in the works in the way that is readily available right now, which is putting the static information that we get on a website so that people can see it. It's not a dashboard yet, but I think that is much better than nothing, right? Is being able to at least see the information that we've taken in. So making sure that that's up to date with the information that we get every quarter. But that's really what that work looks like. And that also involves, the work that this subcommittee has been doing in terms of attempting to secure that data, following up with the agencies or organizations we've been reaching out to, so on and so forth. And I will pause to see if anybody had any additional discussion on that point. I think it's pretty straightforward objective.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
Chris, let me just throw in another thought on this. We've been presenting the probation data quarterly in these graphic kind of forms. Does it make sense to continue to present it that way or in a summarized graphic for, say, the fiscal year?
Oh, okay.
Because I still, you and I have had this discussion before, and I get concerned about conclusions that are drawn from 3 months worth of data where the population size is fairly small, when at least since probation has been supporting data for this committee, we have at least a year. And, that data is available in, at least to me, in a spreadsheet where I could collapse that for, say, the entire fiscal year, or do it in a single graphic by quarter instead of 4 separate. And this is getting into the weeds, but I'm just wondering if you have a preference or a thought about that.
So I think I certainly understand your point of view there. I think there are a couple of factors that that sort of come to mind for me there. I definitely think being able to show trends over time is insightful and important. And I think that the answer may be trying to find a balance between, these two approaches that works to be able to show or display trends while also being able to share data with some frequency that's not once a year, particularly if we're wanting to engage community directly in the ways that this group has chosen to do up to this point. I mean, unless folks just feel like a yearly, big forum that kind of looks at data over, the entire year would be the goal, as opposed to maybe having more than one of those a year. And I think that's, I think that's a good question potentially to pose to the body to see if folks, or maybe at least to CEF, particularly in response to the forum that they just had, right, to say, would you prefer to do this on a yearly basis with trends and information at a different level? Or would you prefer to maybe do it, say, twice a year or something like that, where there's still some information that may be available in a relatively short turnaround time, but at least once a year, you're able to come back and have this larger trend-based discussion?
I want to be clear in that I am not at all suggesting just an annual community forum and sharing of data. From my perspective, there is plenty of data that we can share with the community and findings that we can share with the community in a staged approach. The data that probation is providing to this body is basically juvenile data, and we don't have adult data that we are providing to this body. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist and there isn't a request for it, but that's where we're at too. So we've got the adult system, we've got the juvenile system, we've got what's going on right now, we've got trends. So I think there's plenty of data points and concerns that we can share with, or at least not concerns, but focuses, I think, that we can share with the community. And what I'm wondering about mostly is how do we want to present it on the dashboard, at least initially? Do you want just the juvenile? What I put forward for this body from probation for the juvenile intakes, if we just posted that like that, is that sufficient? I guess more directly.
I think it would be good what I think I hear you saying that you could do is to take the last quarters and put them together into a sort of an annual summary of just what we've already seen every quarter. Is that
Yes.
something that I think that would be helpful, because there aren't that many individual, I think it would just give a more comprehensive picture, and it's not precluding us from doing anything else in the future, but that's just like kind of consolidating what we've just been looking at in a more detailed way, but in a way for all posterity, because you don't want to flip through. I mean, like now there's only a couple quarters, or, a few quarters, but eventually like there'll be 16 quarters, let's just say, in a couple of years, and you're not going to want to flip through 16 quarters. Better to see it. If we do it now, it's like the analogy to me is kind of like scrapbooking. Don't do what I did and wait until your kids are all almost adults and decide you want to download all the pictures and create scrapbooks. You're going to be doing it for a million years. So like, that's a way, like a process, right? That every year we could at least do that. It doesn't preclude us from doing other things, but that way, at least there's kind of like a digest of what we did have during the last year.
Right. And it doesn't need to be aggregated for the
Right.
whole year. It can be still quarterly data. So the data is there, but it's a single graphic that shows what it is over those 4 quarters.
That makes
And
sense
if
to me.
you wanted to get underneath, you could.
Do other people have a thought about that?
I agree also with what both of you are saying, because I think that it can quickly start to become overwhelming amounts to report. And it doesn't mean that it's not there. So if there are specific inquiries that come in, those can be answered, and some of that information can come to light, or some more specifics can be said. But I do think it would quickly become a lot for people to look at. And my only other comment on it is, I do think that perhaps a little bit of narrative to explain the data might be helpful. I know just from listening to the community listening session, some of the data with regards to the juveniles was reported, and I think there were some people didn't quite understand what the data was actually reporting, where it made it look like the arrests had gone up in the last couple of years as a whole, which is not actually correct. Because of COVID, the arrests had gone down, but the data was reporting, and I might be stating the wrong graph, but the data was reporting, you know, like the racial breakdown of those arrests, which made it look like it increased, but in fact, it increased in the racial breakdown, but it didn't increase as overall arrests, if that made sense. And I don't know if anyone
That
else
makes
saw
sense.
that.
Yeah.
But I think it got a little bit confusing for folks to see, okay, what is this actually showing? No, we didn't actually have more arrests during 20 and 21. It was a different change in the racial breakdown.
So this becomes a really tricky ask, because it's one of the things I've been concerned about too, is that we post some results and it's just in graph form, and I have, you know, a footnote that speaks to where the data came from and who conducted the analyses. And that's fine, but interpretation and those nuances that come forward, you know, I could end up writing a report surrounding just the 10 graphs that, you know, I've presented to this body already. And so, you know, where do we draw the line for that? First of all, who's responsible for it? Second of all, if there is a misunderstanding, and, you know, or do we wait until ORJ actually puts out a full report on general supervision, probation services, reentry services, and individuals coming in and out of custody? I mean, we could do that, but that would take a long time or a longer period of time and maybe not be as efficient as this body would like. And I think it's possible to have maybe a compromise here where it's not, maybe where there's an expansion of that footnote that speaks about, okay, this is the data source, this is when it was pulled, this is who conducted the analysis, and these are the you know, the short bullet points, takeaway messages from this graphic, and just leave it at that. Like on the graphic that you're talking about, Melissa, one of the takeaways would be bookings for, you know, adults during this year have dropped dramatically, period, presumably because of COVID. Bullet point 2, while the caseload has dropped, the racial disparity has increased, and just leave it at that. And you know, and I'm not sure that could also, it could also set us up, I mean, probation, for interpretation of some of these charts that might not be what our office wants to put us through. So I'm not sure what the right answer is here. And so I'm going to have to defer to Patrice and Isa on this one. But we can certainly, I think it's an issue that we need to consider and, you know, think about as we move forward with other graphics.
Whatever you did create like that could be placed on the website, right? In the same place where we have the other graphs. So that's another, it wouldn't just be for posterity or our own like fulfillment. It could be also something that could be shared, especially if you did what you were just saying in terms of making some key takeaways or something like that.
Right. Right. I mean, what I worry about is key takeaways, and what do those key takeaways say, how they're interpreted, not just by the community, but with our colleagues in law enforcement. Probation is we're got colleagues in law enforcement all around the county, and I want to make sure that what gets put out is, you know, is accurate data, but also that we're not, you know, that we're good colleagues. I just want to make sure of that.
Mhm.
So that's why whatever language comes out surrounding the graphic will need to be vetted by Patrice and Issa before we go down that road. No matter what, that will be the case, unless they decide we're just going to put out the graphics and leave it for interpretation, which I think is a mistake. But I also appreciate the balancing act.
I will just add that I'm always in strong favor of takeaway language on the graph or the chart,
Okay.
so that folks know what they're looking at and how to read it, or, you know, how to sort of talk about it. Meaning just that, you know, if you're looking at RRI, right, or something like that, you know, saying, okay, so for every white person in our system, there are, you know, 5, you know, black folk, you know, or whatever it is, like, just so that folks have that language. It's like, this is how you read this. This is what this is saying to you. And I think, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for, you know, the folks that you mentioned in terms of, you know, where they may fall on it. I'm always in favor of that. And I mean, I think it's something that, you know, this group, if not, you know, a larger group could even help with, you know, in terms of, you know, what the language says, making sure that it is accurate and fair, but also clear. So yeah, I'm in strong favor of that, so that everyone comes away clear on what the data says and what it doesn't. And Mr. Walker, Dr. Walker, I'm sorry, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, we've often used the health services dashboard as an example of what we might want, but I just acknowledge that although we take every step to make our dashboards, our graphs, et cetera, legible and understandable, there's a great deal of explanation that we put into our dashboard about how to interpret the graphs and what they actually mean. So it's I think it's difficult to put data up without adequate explanation, and I think we just need to figure out how to do that. So that's all. Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. You're absolutely right. And certainly I witnessed the same things that Melissa witnessed at the community forum, where there were just some leaps that were made. And, you know, in the community, I expect that, but the graphics don't say that, but nowhere did we say that they don't say that. And so it just becomes a little tricky.
Right.
So we do need to move in that direction.
Okay. Melissa has her hand up too, or is that leftover hand up? Yeah, okay.
Yes, no, please, just one more comment. And I think this might be sort of what we were talking about before, or in our last meeting, about needing a sort of like a clearinghouse for the data analysis. But then before that data gets published, my guess would be most agencies, whether it's the DA's office or a law enforcement agency, would want to see a draft of, you know, so what those takeaways are, just to make sure that they feel that is what, you know, the data is showing, or they can add information into it. But again, I think that's why, like, for example, the sheriff's office doesn't want to collect data from other agencies and push it out, because we don't want to interpret another agency's data, probably like what Denise is saying with probation not wanting to be responsible for that either. So maybe once we do have a process in place of how that data is coming in and being analyzed, then, you know, the responsibility goes back to the source of the data to say, like, yeah, these takeaways are what we think, or maybe they even create the takeaways from that.
Minimally, that they're aware of what the analysis is, what it's showing, and give them an opportunity to respond or to help support the narrative surrounding what's going on there. And I think I got a little concerned in the forum when there was discussion surrounding, well, can we see this data by law enforcement agency? And that was like, oh, wow, well, how would we do that? And what would that look like? And it sort of raised these other flags that it's tricky.
I do think that's a
Or-
natural question, though. It's a natural question for somebody in the
Absolutely.
community.
I completely agree. It makes sense, but
Mhm.
how do you do that in a collegial setting?
Yeah.
With colleagues and be transparent to the community? And I think what that looks like is that you know, have some kind of a organ or subgroup or subcommittee that makes decisions surrounding this, but also allows the agency and the leadership to understand what's going on and why, and what are we finding, and things along those lines. Gives them an opportunity to respond before it's public notice, because then there can be a fuller picture of what's going on than it would be if it was just a description from this office. And I say this from the standpoint that this has happened to me before, fairly recently, a couple of years ago, with sheriff's office data surrounding mental health and the prevalence of that. And we were preparing a community report, and I put out what my interpretation of the findings were. And Christine Robbins said, you know, Janice, I'm not sure that really is what's going on here. This is what's going on. And I said, oh my God, of course. I didn't even, I'm not embedded in your unit. And it just gives the unit an opportunity to put a lens on what's going on. And that's what I'm advocating for. Not that there be any kind of obstructionism. I'm not in any way saying that, but I am saying just be transparent and be collegial.
Makes sense. Okay, do we want to, any public comment? Is there any public comment? We've been on this item for a while, but let's see if there's any public comment. Okay. Seeing none. Chris, do you want to move to the next objective? There's one more.
Yeah, I think the next objective is objective 3 is pretty simple. Supporting analysis of interventions implemented. It says through the RJTF, but implementation of the recommendations of the RJTF falls to the RJOB. To measure efficacy and assess impact on racial disparities. I think we're not at the level of implementing interventions where I think this, objective would really be triggered. So it's, there hasn't been a lot of movement here, because while there's a lot of, I think, foundational work coming out of all of the subcommittees right now, in terms of the implementation of a new practice or a new program or something like that, where we could measure how effective it is or who's utilizing it by race and ethnicity. We just haven't gotten to that point.
Okay, and I think that, when I look at this and I think about the conversations we've had and the work that we've done, I appreciate always coming back and looking at this. So thank you, Chris, for operationalizing that desire. And yeah, I think I like what you did last time, where you presented to us all the things that we have done. It's helpful to look at that and then see where we're at in terms of where the next step should be. So I appreciate coming back to the plan, and thank you, Chris, for your efforts to keep us on track and make sure we're working in the vein that we're supposed to be working on. Any further comments or questions from the body, subcommittee, or from the public? Okay, seeing none, we can move to the next item, which is to discuss a letter to the DA to follow up on the data request. I think, I'm not sure if that's what I wrote, but what I meant was not the DA, but the police LEAs. Because the body, I think we asked the body, the larger body, to get back to the DA to follow up on a request. And I was actually talking about following up with from the mayor's conference. So I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, is it okay for us to talk about that? I guess I should have clarified that at the beginning. Jill, our parliamentarian, can we talk about that if that's not exactly how it got agendized? Or do we need to?
But do you want to discuss the,
Following up with the, from the mayor's conference, not to the DA, but to the, or should we agendize it for next time?
I think you're fine. I think that there's probably any public or anybody interested in that is in this meeting.
Okay.
I think you're fine. It'll be reflected in the meeting minutes.
No, and I'm sorry, I should have double checked what ended up in there in the end, because that was something that we added at the end. So I do have a start of a letter, and with some places that I've marked in yellow for us to discuss what should go in there. So maybe I will share my screen and then we can take a look at it. And it says I can't do that while someone else is sharing. Is that, Nicole, are you the host? Can you give me permission? Or, yeah, okay. Perfect. Make sure I open the right thing. Okay, so I just work, can you guys see that? Is it large enough so you can see it? Yes, somebody? Is it?
You could make it a little bigger.
Sure,
My old eyes would
I
appreciate
can
it.
never tell how big something is to other people because, oops. Okay, hold on 1 second. Oh, it's not liking me to do that. There we go. Not that big. Is that better? Okay. So I just use I basically work from the template of one of the other letters that we sent. And I know that there's probably some things on the side here that need to be updated. But just looking at the body of the letter, I guess the first thing is, should it be addressed to the city managers and police chiefs? Is that who we want to address it to?
Well, the meeting was the city managers meeting. So really what you're asking is the city managers.
Okay,
Unless you're going to send this to the Police Chiefs Association, but I think that sort of stalled, and that's why the city managers was the next step.
okay.
And it wouldn't be, I see Contra Costa County city managers. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Or should I put it, dear city managers, just dear city managers? And
Just dear city managers.
we know
is
that they're in
enough.
Contra Costa, okay. So then just sit in here. Thank you for welcoming representatives from the Racial Justice Oversight Body to the Mayor's Conference on November 4th, 2021. Is that the right date? That's the date that I found when I went back through. I know it was written wrong one place. So I want to make sure I'm not putting the wrong date. I think that was the right one. The RJOB Data Subcommittee is reaching out to you to follow up on the request for information sharing presented at the conference. We so good so far? I can see you while I have you up on the other side, so, okay. We hope you will join us in sharing your data to help us in our aim of reducing racial and ethnic disparities in our justice system. We are requesting, and then I need some help what we are actually requesting.
This come directly from the DA's letter?
I copied and pasted from some of it, but yeah. I mean, it's not the same thing we're asking from them though, is it?
Right, no.
So I think the whole point was to get the police data, and it was through the city managers asking them to assist in getting that, but I'm not sure, is it arrest data? Is it, I don't know all the parameters. Maybe Chris could help with that on what you're really looking for from the LEAs.
I know we talked about officer initiated stop data. Right?
Well,
I believe that's what's going to come through Aries.
RIPA, you mean? Or that'll be the RIPA data. I think you're you're asking for arrest data.
Okay.
And I,
Is it
and I,
helpful to look at what, like what we did? Okay, we'll go ahead. Arrest data, demographic, right?
maybe what you could say is, we are requesting arrest data to include, you know, the arrest location, charges, demographics of the arrested individual. I don't know, I'm just throwing out a couple.
Yeah, no, this is helpful. See, demographics. We are requesting arrest data from your, should I say, from your local police department, right?
Yes,
Including charges, demographics, zip code. Is that what we asked for?
yes, and I would say city or zip code, it just depends on how they collect it.
Okay, how should I just say location or like,
Yeah, location is probably,
okay, location,
you know, date, I think is date of birth. I'm just gonna pull up so yeah, ours is the date, the race, the gender.
Would be explicit in that, Becky, rather than just demographics, because that
Race,
means
gender.
different things to different people.
Totally, yeah. If I put it in parentheses like that, is that good, you think?
Yes,
Okay, so what are the things we want? Race, gender,
Those are the only two demographics that we have on our arrest report, but
age would be really, or DOB would be really helpful.
okay, probably. I mean, if we ask for age and they have DOB, then I think they'll give us that, and if they,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. Race, gender, age, location, date.
date of offense, okay.
and maybe
That's pretty much all we get from your booking spreadsheet, isn't it, Melissa?
yeah, the only other thing you might want to ask for is the disposition, meaning cited or booked. You know, like what the disposition of the arrest was.
Cited or booked.
Yeah, citation or booked into custody.
When it says charges, is that, do we need an adjective before that, or does everybody understand what that means? Okay. Charges, demographics, race, gender, age, location, date, and disposition, citation, or booked into custody. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, now I think we need a little bit, like, we're asking them to do what? We're asking them to are they giving us that directly, or we're asking them to release it to you, the sheriff's office, Melissa? What are we asking them to do?
No, not to us. I think that's where our black hole is at this point.
Yeah,
We want the data, but we need it to be analyzed.
and we don't have anybody who we feel comfortable releasing it, or they feel right. So this is where potentially that Office of Racial Justice and Equity comes in, right? If they were to be
Yeah.
so who would we, I mean, I know ideally, if you read on in the letter, ideally we were saying to enclose something that they could sign and, you know, bring it forward. But if we don't know who we're asking them to share it with, then we're kind of at a standstill, right?
Yes.
Yeah, other than just asking for a commitment on their part to provide this data, you know, I don't know if you want to, I know we want it now, but a commitment to provide the data, because we don't have a designated
Mm-hmm.
receptor for it yet. That's the tough part, because
Yeah.
I think they're gonna, the question is, well, where's it gonna go and what's gonna happen with it?
Do you think
So-
that if the the Office of Social Justice and Racial Equity was able to receive it, that would be a reasonable receptor in the eyes of the LEAs?
Well, I think it certainly could be if, you know, they were given some information about
How it
Well,
would be
what-
used?
what happens with it at that point, because my guess is most agencies are going to say they don't have the ability to provide the analysis,
Mhm.
the graphs and the charts,
Right.
just due to staffing. So,
Then it would be better, honestly, if it was all done in a standardized fashion, right? So they could be compared from one to the other.
yeah.
Okay, so please complete the enclosed intention, or like, I'm thinking like a, you know, intent to, or is it important for them to like, okay. What should we do?
So my honest opinion is that until we have a place to accept the data and analyze the data, it's a really hard ask for people to provide it when they don't know where they're providing it and what it ultimately looks like in the end, and where it's going and what's going to be done. Because I think that if I were to receive the request, not being part of the committee or part of the county, I would have a lot of questions. Well, okay, I know what data you want, but what are you going to do with it? And I think it's a tough ask without having that part defined.
I agree completely. Completely. And it's not only what data, but who's going to do the work? Have they been certified for confidentiality and all of those aspects of providing sensitive data to another agency?
The other way to approach it, I suppose, is that we could just ask them to release it to that office with the assumption that they are going to be the ones to do it.
And who would they do that, give that to then? Who
Well,
would-
right, I know.
Who would that be? You know?
Is there anybody identified as who will be the staff of that office? Where are we at with that? I have not been at all of those meetings by any stretch of the imagination, so I don't have who has a really good idea? Does anyone here have an idea where they're at in terms of the formation of that office, and if there is somebody who we could? Because yeah, if we don't have anybody to name, that gets a little tricky. Jill, do you have any idea?
And Cheryl's on this call, so maybe she has more, because I believe she's part of the sort of the inner circle doing it. But my understanding is it's moving forward in their process, but they're not at a stage to identify anything that you're asking for at this point in time. So funding has been set aside through Measure X funds, but there hasn't been an ask as to, you know, all the funds that they might need to stand that up.
Does that include somebody for data analysis?
That's a super good question, Becky.
I did
One
bring
of-
that up at the quarterly meeting, like to ask that they,
Right,
Yeah.
one of many questions that I have about
yeah.
all of that. So there is a space that's identified in the future building that will be at 651 Pine. So in a few
That's
years.
good. That's good. Cheryl, did you have anything to share, or any suggestions of how we might approach this? So we've kind of come to a little bit of a block here.
Hola. Well, what Ms. Jill said is correct. They are going through the process. It's been a long, painstaking process. And yes, so what you guys say, while it may make sense, I'm gonna tell you that I still say that you make the ask, because by the time they get to around to even addressing the ask, then you can deal with the questions. Part of this issue that that is frustrating from the public standpoint and Chris, you were at the meeting last week, is that people are just frustrated, especially with all of this red tape and these problems. And so if you keep pushing it back, waiting for a perfect opportunity where everything lines up, oh, well, we can't do this and we can't make the ask because we don't know exactly that people are perfectly trained. Oh, but we can't do that because we don't know if we have a perfect venue. It's never going to be perfect. We have to set the stage to make sure that we make the ask and that we make them adhere to what the public needs. We heard this when Chris and I went to speak at the mayor's conference. But we don't have enough personnel to do it. If you have enough personnel to arrest people, you got enough personnel to keep the records and release them to us. This is the way I look at it. You got enough personnel to keep not just arresting but stopping people. Then you have enough personnel to write down who you're stopping and why you're stopping them. And then keeping accurate records so that we can know who they are, what category they fit in, how old they are, where they live, and where they come from. And you don't get to say that we can't keep accurate records. You don't get to say that. You don't get to say that that's incumbent upon the public or is incumbent upon the RJOB to figure it out. No, you don't get to say that. You don't get to say it's incumbent upon us to figure out why we are being arrested or who is being arrested and why they're being arrested and what numbers and how old they are. And no, that's part of the job of the law enforcement, is to keep the public aware and to be transparent about how they're spending public monies. That is something that is put into that budget. And on top of that, we just gave more money, more public money into the budget for that. So no, I don't buy that argument that we have to have everything all lined up perfectly in order to make the ask. All we're doing is making an ask. I think we spend way too much time trying to make their counter argument for them instead of doing what all of us were assigned to do for this oversight body, is trying to figure out these disparities and trying to crush them, trying to get rid of these disparities. And we can't get rid of those disparities unless we have the proper information. And we can't have the information if, one, they're not tracking it and they're not giving it to us, and we're not making it, and we are not requesting it. And we can't just request it with this soft pedal. Well, if you think you might want to give it to us, maybe you have some time, or if you're like, no, we need the information in order to do the job that each of us volunteering, but agree to do. That's all I'm saying, Ms. Becky.
No, I totally agree with you. I think the part where I'm just stuck is that if the intention is to make it easy for them to do it, right? We want to give it to them in a way that, like, my understanding was the intention was like that they could sign it and then it would be done, so that then there is no reason, like, why are you not sharing with us? We gave it to you. But so I just don't know who we should put, that's all. So I'm totally on board with you. Cheryl, I think that we should ask, but I want to make sure that we don't want to ask and then have to ask them again afterwards because we didn't ask the right question. That's what I'm trying to avoid, if that makes sense. So, I mean, do you think, Cheryl, you are part of that other group? Do you think that we could put on there I mean, that does seem to be the right, at least to me, the name of it sounds like it's the right group of people to release it to that office. Should we put that?
I think that they can, I think that's a resource, yes. And I think it's an appropriate resource. I guess I'm stuck on why are we spending so much time trying to make it, I get trying to facilitate it, but I don't know if I'm really interested in making it easier or making it easy. Making it easier is different than making it easy. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Easier is different than making it easy. I don't really, honestly, just being very frank, I don't care about making it easy. Right? Making it easier, maybe. But making it easy is just not in my purview because their job to be transparent to the public. Now, whether it's easy or not is not my, it's just not my, I don't care. Making it easier, maybe. Maybe we can facilitate that because there's something that we can work on. But whether or not it's easy, being arrested or being held, when you don't know why you're being held, or you're being held, but the young white male who did the same thing that you did, not being held, is probably not easy to swallow if you're a young Black male or a young Latino male, right?
Sure.
So it's easy for them. So I don't think I'm really caring about easy per se. I would like us to have the information to present back to the public, because that is the message that last week in the forum we held. They were not happy. They were very unhappy. If any of you are able to attend, you would know that.
So Denise, I see you have your hand up. I'm just wondering, is there I know like in the school world, we have like a sort of generic release of information when two school-based entities want to talk to each other that can be filled out to name different bodies. Is there a similar sort of standard release of information authorization? I just made up that term right there. I'm not sure, but Denise, before we go to you, I'm just wondering maybe if Melissa, is there something like that when you want to exchange information with another agency? Do you guys have like a template that we could work from?
You're asking if agencies have a template that they sign between each other about releasing information?
Mm-hmm. Like the analogy to me is like in school, like if we have a student and then we need to release their educational record to, let's say, to a doctor, or to, like to allow the doctor to talk to the school or the psychologist to talk to the school or whatever, we have like a standard template for release of information that names like the scope and the time, and it's like a, can be customized to be exactly what's needed. And maybe that transcends different sorts of agencies. I'm not sure. I just didn't want to try to make something up if there's already something that exists like that.
Yeah, let me think, and I can't think of anything like that.
Okay.
Normally information that is, like DOJ information or CLETS-based information, agencies have, a law enforcement agency can access that, like
yeah, they're just like by statute, they're allowed to access it or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you, Denise, maybe because you're in the business of getting data from other places, so that maybe is more in your wheelhouse anyways.
And we actually, I had looked into this previously for Melissa, thinking that we had a template that we could use, and our office does not. And part of that is the DSAs that were the data sharing agreements and the MOUs that we have in place are very specific to the data, very specific to who's going to be doing the analyzing, who is, certified for confidentiality, all of those things. So it really does need that level of detail and for a data sharing agreement. Now, what I was going to go to also was, who is the individual in the CAO's office who's heading the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice? Is that Paul or is it Lara? Because one thought.
That's a super good question. I don't know that this is a county-led effort. I believe this is a community-led effort. It will be housed, I do believe, it's going to be in the county, the secondary, not the county administration building, but the secondary building downtown. So it's not being housed within any division in the county. It'll stand alone.
Well, what I'm wondering is if there is a senior analyst in the CAO's office who has kind of broad direction for this new office, if we couldn't just say,
so I'll just stop you. Yeah, so there is nobody in the CAO's office, as far as I know.
Really?
This is a community-led effort, and they're doing a lot of listening sessions. It's been put in their hands to develop what they feel is the right. I honestly don't know how far they've gotten, but they're doing a lot of listening to the community. So it's not a county run effort.
Okay.
I know that
Nevertheless, though-
Supervisor Joya's chief of staff sits in the inner circle.
Okay.
So I feel like that we're not going to solve this problem right now based on the conversation that we've had, but I feel like that maybe we need to do some more research and come back. My only concern is that it's already been a couple months since this happened, and I don't want them to forget that we did it.
So maybe what I suggest is, rather than the release of information, if you have any questions, please contact. We would love to know the right person in your organization to follow up with, or something along those lines.
That's a good idea. So, okay. How about we could say, could you please provide the name, the contact in in their office or in the police department?
Whoever the city managers are going to put as the point person on this. So it could be different depending on which city, you know.
Okay, how
Walnut
about,
Creek.
could you please sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Identify a point person and provide their name so we can follow up with a data sharing agreement in the near future. How about that? Is that a good compromise?
Or next steps, or something along those lines, because I'm not sure, each city is each city, and you know.
Right, but the reason why I said that is because that at least lets them know where we're headed, even though we don't have it to produce at this moment. But maybe let's discuss that. Anybody on the panel have a thought?
I would say name and contact information too, just for being explicit.
Sure. And then we could make another, we could make a link to a Google form and they could fill it out. That's probably the easiest. I was going to say we can make a sheet and they could fill it. I don't know. What is easier for people right now? Like, do you think that people would be more inclined to click on a link and fill out a Google form, or would they be more inclined to fill out a piece of paper and scan it back to us?
I honestly think they'd be more inclined to talk to somebody to find out what you're asking for, and how, you know, where it's going to go, and who, you know, who's going to have it and what you're going to do with it.
Okay.
Quite frankly.
But
But
just to get the name of the person who they.
Right. So I just think when you put data sharing agreement in, and maybe Melissa, you know, have thoughts on that, but that can be pretty scary for organizations, I think.
Okay. Like that.
Follow up with next steps, or, you know, something along, so that, you know, you're asking for something specific, but not specific. You know,
or discuss the details in more depth, you know.
The best way to gather this information, kind of thing, along those
Perfect.
lines.
Yeah.
So we can follow up. Okay, I think next steps kind of encompasses all those different things, doesn't it? You think, or you think it's better to name what they are?
Becky, just a grammar thing. Can you just change it, instead of would you say just would you?
Yes.
Because they can if they want.
You're right. Would you please identify a point person and provide their name and contact info so we can follow up with next steps? Does anybody want to suggest a revision to the end of this sentence?
I would just leave it at, so we may follow up. So we may follow up and just leave it. I don't even think the next step is necessary. That's just me.
I mean, then at least we're getting something, which is we're getting the name of the person who they've identified as being responsible, right?
Yes.
Okay,
So for whatever you need to follow up, you can follow up.
right, okay. Everyone okay with that? Do we want them to just email that name and information to us? Or do we want to make another sheet that they fill out and scan back to us? I just don't know how people's offices work. This is a silly sort of question, but it could impact our response rate. Melissa, if you were to get something like that, what would be the easiest way for you to respond?
By email,
Okay,
please send this information to whatever email.
and then the question is, where do we want it to go? We don't have like a RJOB email, do we?
No,
Kind of do, but it's not being used for that purpose. We have a YouTube channel, so technically we have to have
Email.
an email address for our job, but it has not been used publicly like that.
I mean, this doesn't have to come from me, but my name was on the one that I took it from. I mean, I could put my information in there, but I don't know if that makes sense.
well, you are the chair of the data subcommittee, so it does make sense.
Okay, does anybody have any other ideas? It's not a very friendly email address, but that is what it is. And then should I also say that they can contact me then? Thoughts? Okay. To the city managers, thank you, Nicole, for confirming the date was correct in here. I'm saying in here that we're reaching out to this data subcommittee, follow up on the request. That all still makes sense, right? Should I take this sentence out or is that important?
This is Matt. I think it's probably important just to keep the kind of cooperative
Contextualize.
nature
Yeah.
in the context that we're all
Okay.
kind of trying to do this together.
Good, thank you. Okay, and then I think the rest of it seems okay to me. Anybody else have any thoughts about the other paragraphs, anything in here?
Well, if I'm reading that first sentence or the first sentence of the second paragraph, we hope you will join us in sharing your data. Who's us? Join the RJOB? Do we
But
want?
join our efforts by sharing your data.
There you go.
There you go. I took that from the DA letter in a different context and it made more sense in the other context.
So join our efforts by sharing your data. To help.
To help reduce or help, I guess, sharing the data itself doesn't help reduce the racial and ethnic disparity, so. It's a little wordy in here, but I think that otherwise it creates a false connection. Just by sharing the data, they're not going to reduce the disparities, right?
Of understanding racial and ethnic disparities in our justice system, because that's really what we're doing.
Understanding racial and ethnic.
Yeah, we're going to be
decent to understanding.
examining, using their data to examine, do racial disparities exist in your community and to what level they are. And so it's kind of a broad term rather than, you know.
Christina, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I don't know if this was specified during the mayor's conference, but is there a certain point in time of data that we're looking for? Any data, recent data, does it matter? Or is that intentionally broad to see what they respond with?
Well, I think we've kind of shifted, and I don't think we're actually expecting that nobody's gonna like hand us some data right now, but rather that we're like identifying who is the person that we will then work out the details with. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. So, and we did kind of hint right here that these people are giving it to us quarterly. So that does give them some sort of idea that we're not talking about every day, but we're also not talking about every year. I don't know, thoughts? I'm open to whatever people think. Do you think it's too, Christina, do you think it's like too broad that it's not clear what we're asking for? Is that why, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that was my first response, but if we're just requesting data period and we want to follow up to know how to do that, then that makes sense. But if that's the specific ask in that line, I think we should be more specific. But I guess when I'm putting it all together, I see where the shift is. That does make sense.
We could put something right before requesting. We're requesting quarterly data. Are we requesting? I mean, what are we asking for? Quarterly is how we've been looking at it, right?
I think asking for it monthly is going to be too much of a lift. I would say semi-annual or quarterly.
Well, I don't know if you need to clarify that, because the next line, the next paragraph down, you say presently we're
Quarterly.
receiving quarterly
Yeah.
data from others. So that
Yeah.
it's up to them what, you know, what works best
Yeah,
for them.
good point.
Now, I am not an English teacher, but do you think this sentence should go before this sentence? Should those in that paragraph switch places?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. These data sharing partnerships. All right. Am I right that Ellen and Tamisha are the co-chairs at this point? Yes, okay.
But Ellen isn't interim anymore.
Yeah, she's permanent.
Thank you. And Nicole, should I send this back to you so you can check on what's on here, or does that? Is Nicole on here?
Nicole had a hard stop today.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, you can go ahead and send it to Nicole.
Okay.
And I'll make note of it in the.
Okay, thanks. And then, great. Okay, thank you guys so much for taking the time to do that. I know that's a little bit tedious to do things like that by committee, but I think that there was a lot that came out actually through that. So I think it was a good process. Is there any more comment from the body or from any members of the public about that item? Okay, are we good? Once we do get that all right, are we okay to send that out? Are people good with that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much. The next item is an update on the police trainings on adolescent development.
I'll give an update on that. We have put in a request through the CAO's office for federal earmark funds, or what used to be federal earmark funds, for the community programs. Oh, Melissa, help me with the name of it. Funds, I think, something like that. For funds that would cover all law enforcement agencies in the county, as well as also cover time for overtime or any other backfill time that's necessary. So we've put that in. Tomorrow, I'm submitting letters of support from the agencies that we have received letters of support from. We've not received as many as I would have hoped. The chief sent out a letter to all of the police chiefs in the county and leaders in the county surrounding this, and we got some right away. And Patrice has been following up as well, just as a reminder. So we may have 6 or 7 letters of support for this. And I will send them to Lara Delaney tomorrow night before I go for the day, and then we'll just see where it lands. So there was an initial discussion surrounding, we are in basically we're in competition with the DA surrounding diversion funds. Her office has also submitted an earmark funding request for a diversion program. And initially it came, when we learned that, we thought, oh, well, why don't we just pull together, collapse a package for both the DA and other law enforcement agencies to do a broad diversion package. And it was recommended that we not do that because the total on the package then would be over 2 million, and we're really at 1.5 right now, so it'd be too expensive. So we'll see. There was a legislative committee meeting that took place by some members of the board to discuss and prioritize things. They did not feel that they could prioritize the 3 projects. So it's going to go to the full Board of Supervisors, at which point a decision will be made around prioritization of these 3 projects moving forward for the funding. And I've been told that we will be notified as to when that is, so that we can send the chief in to advocate for this. So that's as far as I know. I don't know when that is. I've been following the Board of Supervisors agendas closely, and I haven't seen it yet. So that's where we are. We're waiting to see if we move forward, and if not, we'll have to have another backup plan.
Well, thanks for putting all that together so quickly. I know it was kind of a lot, and I think it looked really good what I saw from it. So I think.
Thanks. I think a lot of people contributed to the ideas behind it, and I'm excited about it. I find it very difficult to believe that they would not prioritize a program that is way far upstream. I mean, diversion is great, but this is before even contact. And that is what I think is so important, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So I'll keep you posted.
Great. And if not, then we can go after some other types of funding as well.
Yes,
So.
yes.
Okie doke. Any other comment about that? Anybody from the panel or from the public? Okay. So, I realized we didn't agendize on here talking about the community listening session, but is there anything that just anybody want to recap from that? I know we talked about it a little bit in the context of some other things. No? Okay. Next steps. Our next meeting is March 24th. And I think that I'm going to work on putting together that letter, making sure, send it to Monique and Nicole to make sure that we got all the members right on there and everything, and we'll send that out. Chris is you're gonna send me the an editable version of what you did last time, so I can incorporate it with the work plan in terms of associating those activities that we've completed with the work plan. And that's what I have for next steps. Is there anything else that I've missed here?
I would just say that there was a bit of a discrepancy about the scheduling for the forum. We were going to try to push it back to give us a little bit more time to get folks there and publicize the information. That's why that wasn't included on the agenda. But I think it's worthwhile we don't have to, I realized that the meeting was about to end. I'm not here to, take the time away from folks. I'm just saying that I think it's worthwhile to have a fuller debrief probably on the next meeting agenda to really discuss it.
Okay, that sounds good. So we'll make a note of that for the next agenda. I'll make a note here. Okay. Any further comment from any members of the subcommittee or from the public?
One thing.
Cheryl, did you say something?
Yes, I just have one thing to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so it is History Month, and I want to just put this on you guys' mind since we didn't get to talk about it at our big meeting. But I sit on the board of the ACLU, and there's something we were talking about these months. And for those of you who don't know the story, you may want to look into it, and I can send a link if you want to. It's about the history of California and how California used to not allow Black, Latino, Filipino, and Chinese defendants to testify against white persons on trial. And it's a fascinating history of it. So once there was a white man who shot and killed a prominent Black businessman in San Francisco in an unprovoked attack. And there were lots of witnesses. There was who were willing to testify, but the problem was everybody was Black who were the witnesses. And in California in 1861, that meant that their testimony didn't count. And so from 1850 to 1863, there was actually a law that bans that testimony. So when we talk about not just Black and brown, Asian American, indigenous people behind who are criminal defendants, but also not being allowed to defend themselves, to testify against other people, to be on juries. We're talking about the whole criminal legal system, not just when they're arrested. So I just wanted to put it on people's minds, especially now during Black History Month, that we need to be looking at the total realm of this criminal legal system and why it's important to look at every aspect. That was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, everybody, we'll see you in March, and thank you everybody for your promptness today, for being here and for your engagement. This is always a highlight of my month to work with all of you. So happy to see you this time. We'll see you again next month.
Thank you.
Thanks.